Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this Community Energy webinar, hosted by SP Energy Networks and supported by the Energy Saving Trust. I'm Ross Jones. I work for the Energy Saving Trust, and I will be hosting this event. This is the third in a series of 3 workshops. The focus of this workshop is on the connection process. A recording of this workshop and the slides will be made available on the SP Energy Networks Community Energy webpage after the event. Today's workshop is split into 3 parts. In the first part, we will hear from the SP Energy Networks team about the application process, connection design, development network capacity. If time commits, we will then have a short break before hearing about the connection delivery process, land and planning considerations. Then in the final section, we will hear from 2 community representatives about their own journey through the connection process and some thoughts about how best to approach it as a community group. If you have any questions, then please place these in the chat. If time permits, I will ask them in each of the relevant sessions just when the presenters finish speaking. However, we will be covering a lot of ground, so if there isn't enough time there, then the team will respond to them during the chat as the session progresses. So without any further ado, I will hand over to Liam Cantwell, who is one of the Community Energy Engagement Managers at SP Energy Networks. Liam.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks, Ross, sorry. Yeah, just to say thank you to everyone for attending today. I'm Liam Cantwell and I am the Community Energy Manager looking after our licence area in SP Distribution, which covers Central and Southern Scotland in conjunction with my counterpart, Louise, who looks after our SP Manweb area of North West England and North Wales. Next slide, please, Ross. So I suppose the most important piece to start with is who we are and why we're here today. First off, starting with our role within the Scottish Power umbrella. Scottish Power itself is broken into 3 distinct different business units, with the first being Scottish Power Retail Business, which is focused on our customer-based service. Next, you have SP Renewables, which looks after onshore and offshore renewable energy assets. And then lastly, the part of the business that you're dealing with today is SP Energy Networks, which again has 2 distinct parts to it. The transmission side of the business that looks after the high voltage supply of electricity, and the distribution element, which looks after low voltage supply to homes and businesses across SP Distribution and SP Manweb. The next most prominent part is probably understanding how we are governed. Across the board, the government sets specific energy-related policies. Off of the back of these policies, Ofgem ensures that this policy is enforced and regulates the DNOs, otherwise known as distribution network operators, across the UK to make sure that they are in alignment with the policies that have been set. As part of the recent policy developments relating to green energy targets, achieving net zero, and more recently the emergence and developments relating to GB Energy, the Local Energy Plan and Clean Energy 2030, the need for tailored and specific support to help community energy reach its potential has never been more great, which is why we have established our community energy strategy as part of our business plan that exists between 2023 to 2028. This plan and strategy is focused on 3 main pillars. The first being support, looking at different capacity building opportunities, ways that we can support connections of projects going forward, and different specific guides and self-help offerings that we can give to different stakeholders. The second being, from an awareness point of view, raising the profile of community energy and the benefits that it can bring. One of the ways that we have did that is by commissioning and supporting the State of the Sector report, the national one which looks at the whole of the UK, and also a bespoke one that we have taken out to look at our 2 licence areas in SP Distribution and SP Manweb. The findings from these reports will help to shape our strategy going forward and make sure that we're continually on the right track to develop the support that's needed within this sector. From an awareness point of view, we are also developing different case studies of best practices and successful projects, as well as making sure that we have fully mapped out all community energy assets and projects across our licence area. The last part looks at continuous improvement. This is a multifaceted approach, which again looks at the first 2 elements with support and awareness, and make sure that is what make sure that what has been developed across these two is continually reviewed, analysed and pushed forward as we look throughout our plan in 2023 right through to 2028. Next slide, please, Ross. Thank you. So, in order to help grow the community energy sector and to sustain and encourage the growth of this sector, there needs to be a focus on innovative strategies, effective engagement with new and existing partners, and collaboration across various sectors to ensure that there is long-term success and lasting resilience across communities. Below, you'll see some of the focused areas and targets that we hope will help to grow the sector. The first, looking at accessibility, making sure that the information, opportunities and guidance that we have is accessible to all, from a demographic point of view, from a deprivation point of view, and from an availability point of view. The access, information and resources that we create, we want to make sure that it's available to not just community energy groups, but all those with a need for an increased energy resilience and support. From an identification point of view, making sure that we are engaging with existing projects that have already been successful in creating their own community energy projects, looking to engage with new projects that are in the process of setting up a project, but also speculative projects that haven't quite entered into that journey, and making sure that we are providing the most support that we can to them. From a building partnerships point of view, again, this is something that's slightly more multifaceted. Firstly, looking at the internal engagement that we do with our connections department, which you'll see are here today, as well as other relevant departments which can help support the sector as it grows and as we hope to progress in our strategy. And also industry engagement, making sure that with the community energy bodies, the climate action hubs and various local authorities that we are providing the support and correct contacts as we progress through this strategy. And lastly, from an education point of view, making sure that the channels engagement that we have are appropriate with the correct content, that we have a targeted strategy that meets the needs of the stakeholders that we engage with. And also from a youth engagement point of view, making sure that there is a steady influx of these projects going on from a long-term basis, that we have a new flow of projects as we progress past our 2023-2028 timeframe. Next slide, please, Ross. And just lastly, before I pass you on to our connection colleagues, if there is any further information that you would like to take from our strategy webpage or getting in contact with our community energy team, you'll see that the different QR codes up above will give you direct access to them, as well as the blue one registering you as a stakeholder, which means any upcoming events, you will be given updates towards these. I hope you enjoy the rest of the webinar going forward today, and I'll touch back in with you at the end. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Liam. So just before Nicola comes on board, just to say, if you do have any questions, then just please place them in the chat and we'll ask them at the end of each session. So Nicola, thank you.
Thank you, Ross. Afternoon, everyone. I just thought it was a good time to come in before we get into the connections process, any detailed understanding of quotations, options, and so on, just to introduce myself in terms of a customer relationship manager and what we're available or what we're here to do. As a customer relationship manager, we are here to support you through the process, whether that be prior to putting in the application. Maybe you have some questions on the applications, documents that might be required, or it could be that you're in the application process, awaiting a quotation, who your designer is in the delivery part. You might want to understand who your delivery engineer is, a bit of an insight into the process. We have customer relationship managers in Scotland and in England who are all here to support any types of questions or requirements that you might have. So I'm going to pass on to Derek, who's going to give Derek and Eugene, who's going to give you a bit more understanding on the team in design and development and the application process. But just make a note of our names and do get in touch, because we are here to support and guide you through making the connections process work for you. Thank you. Derek and Eugene?
Yep, so I'll just hand you straight over to Derek and Eugene to press on. Thanks.
Good afternoon all. My name's Eugene Kenny and I'm the Head of Customer Design for Wales. I believe there's another slide next. So this is the setup as we are in the Scottish Power ManWeb area, the SPM area. Our licensed design and development manager is Sean Kennedy. For the customer design manager for Merseyside is Neil Woodcock. Ken Braston is in Cheshire and Wirral. As I said, I'm in Wales. Alex Woodall is the development house manager, and he looks at the future investment that's going on within the excuse me, within the license area. And Diane Griffiths is Nicola's equivalent in the SPM area as the customer relationship manager.
Thanks, Eugene. My name's Derek Jessamine. So I'm the Head of Connections Design for the west of Scotland, working within the SPD, SP Distribution License Design Development team. So we've got Alistair Graham as our License Design Development Manager, and reporting to Alistair, we have Carl Watson, who's the Head of Connections Design for major generation projects. So that's anything that's 1 megawatt and above. And he covers the whole of the SPD patch, so all 6 districts that you can see in the screen there. We've then got Harry McDade, who's the Head of Connections Design for the East of Scotland. So he looks after the Central and Fife and Edinburgh and Borders areas, and all the towns and villages within that. Myself, I look after the West of Scotland, which is Glasgow, Lanarkshire, Ayrshire, and Clyde, and Dumfries. And we deal with all demand connections up to and including 33 kV or EHV, and we deal with anything from projects that fail, that look at fast track at the small level of G99, and we deal with up to 1 megawatt of generation. Excuse me. We also have within the team Audrey Mitchell, who's our design support manager. So she has a team working for her that will take the jobs as they are applied for, sift through the applications, make sure all your information is correct for you, so that we can progress with quotations or whatever it is that you've requested from us. She also has a team working for her that deal with the fast track type applications for single domestic properties that are looking to have combined battery and PV in their premises below a certain trigger level. We also then have Holly Goodwin, who's our development house manager. She looks after the investment works in a similar method to our colleague in the SP ManWeb. We will work closely with Holly to make sure that our connections proposals are in line with what the wider investment plans are and what we're doing to fulfil our regulatory contract with Ofgem. And then we have the customer relationship managers. Nicola, you've just met at the start. We also have Rob Fusco and Sam Liddle, and they cover the whole of the SP distribution patch. If we could move to the next slide, that would be great. So I'll just have a quick talk through the connections process, what connections type of connections we offer, and the process involved. So if we can move to the next slide again, please. So we offer 4 types of services within the connections design area. So we offer a budget cost, a quote plus, a feasibility study, and a formal quotation. And I'll just give you a quick idea on what each of them is. So as hopefully most people can see on the screen, I know the text is slightly small, but the budget cost is a free of charge service with a 10 or 20 day lead time. The point of connection will be assumed as being nearest to the site entrance. There may be some high level work done, but we wouldn't at this stage do a formal network study. It's a high level budget element. It's quite suitable if your project's not really fully scoped or shovel ready. You're not starting in the immediate term. You're just looking to get an idea on what roughly the cost is going to be for the job. Is that going to make the job practicable for you? The costs obviously may vary significantly from formal quotation once we've actually had to do a formal network study and then any detailed design that we then have to do. And what a budget cost, we can't secure capacity at this stage. It's not, you're not in a formal contract with anybody at that stage. The next level up from budget cost is we offer a quote plus service. Now, this is very similar to budget cost. It's also free of charge, has a 20-day lead time, but it gives you a bit of optioneering, and it allows you to ask us for up to 3 different capacity options. So typically customers will look at maybe what some trigger levels would be for reinforcement on the network, or reinforcement upstream, or whether it would involve works at a national grid level. So it's a useful option to decide what's the most viable project for you to progress with. Again, similar to the budget cost, it's got POC assumptions, network studies, and costs can vary from a formal offer in the same way that a budget cost. The capacity still can't be secured at this stage. However, one of the advantages to the Quote Plus system is that you can secure your position under any interactivity queue, which is important in areas that have got lots of constraints, or a limited network where you know that there's potentially other competition in the area, or it's just that there's general restrictions in the area. So getting yourself in using the Quote Plus method, asking for the options and then providing us with the details to go ahead with a formal offer allows you to secure a position in the interactivity queue. So there's some benefits in there. The only difference really from this to a budget cost is that you do require a letter of authority, because we're going to be moving ahead very quickly into the formal process if you decide to push the button once you've had your Quote Plus. Another option we do is a feasibility study. It's like a Quote Plus, but with more detail. Is probably the best way to describe it. We'll look at carry out an in-depth study. We'll look at requested loads, actually identify the connection locations and voltages at that point in time. We'll look at likely capacity needs, so that we can see what's the tipping points, what's going to trigger reinforcement, what's not going to trigger reinforcement, any time implications that are required for that. It's most suitable for advanced scoping, and when you're looking at multiple load options. However, it is a chargeable type of offering, and it'll vary depending on your load requirements. So if you're looking at our website, we have a charging methodology, and the charges will typically vary from £500 to £7,000 plus, depending on the size and scale of what it is you're looking for, and the detail required in the feasibility study, and whether it's something that we can do within the local connections team, or whether we have to refer to our head office system design team, and again depending on the scope and scale of the project. And then moving on, the last type of offer is the formal quotation, where we can actually enter into a formal contract with yourselves. So this offering, it's the least cost offer as obligated by Ofgem. And it'll be valid for 3 months. We can extend it for a further 90 days, subject to certain criteria, depending on whether there's other things that are happening in the area, or there's other challenges. It must be a single load application, and you must have complete and relevant documentation and information ready for that. I'll go over that in a couple of slides' time, just what our kind of minimum information requirements are when we get to this stage. So most quotations will take between 15 to 65 working days, depending on the voltage and depending on what quotation type you go for, whether you're looking for a licensed offer from ourselves, where we give you an option for a point of connection only, and for us carrying out all the works to provide the supply on site. You can also go down the point of connection only route through a radar system, and there's slightly shorter timescales, as at that point all we'll provide with you is here's the point of connection, and at that point you would go away and appoint an independent connection provider to carry out design and works, either for our adoption or for that adoption via independent distribution network operator. And the formal quotation as well, connection offer expenses will apply, and it would be dependent upon the load or demand that you've requested. So if it's greater than 50 kVA generation or greater than 250 kVA demand, the connection offer expenses will apply, but that will be covered off in a bit more detail by Eugene in a later slide. So if I could ask you to move on to the next slide, please. So simplistically, for how to apply, 3 different methods. The online application, the link here would take you to our website, and you can complete an online application which gets into our system, will get the job raised and then allocated to the relevant design team, depending on the area and what it is that you've asked for. It'll go to the right team there. You can also do it by postal application. Send us in the appropriate details to the address that's on the shown on the screen there, and also telephone if you can give us a call if it's a straightforward, relatively simple project. You can start the ball rolling with the telephone, and the contact team will be able to help you with any other documentation that would be required. If we could move on to the next slide, thank you. So the minimum information for an application, straightforward things here: the customer name and address, any other contact details and how you prefer us to contact you. It's really important for us to make sure we maintain good lines of communication all throughout the whole journey for you. So different customers have different needs. Some people still prefer white mail. So most people will be down the email route, Teams, in-person meetings. We can offer all of these types of contact moving forward. Other things that we need to make sure that we are provided with to make sure we provide the proper quotation and an accurate quotation for you is a site address and a site plan at an appropriate scale, so that we can see where the site boundary is, layout of the buildings, any substations that may be required on site, and importantly as well, where the proposed locations are of any metering points, so that we can make sure that we're catching it early in the process if there's any challenges with any of these, either the location of the substation not being suitable or metering points in the middle of buildings, things like that, so that we can make sure we're catching and engaging with you as early as possible to prevent any problems later on at the potentially at delivery stages. We'd also look for a letter of authority where you're acting on behalf of a customer, a date when you actually look for the customer for the connections to be made, and then the maximum capacity and KVA and any technical details of any generators that are going to be operating in parallel with the system. So typically that's going to be the ENA form and a single line diagram, so that we understand how that is going to connect and contribute to the network. Additional information that may be required during the course of the quotation, any further details regarding the intended usage of the equipment. So if there's anything that might potentially be seen as a disturbing load that may actually cause issues for other customers that are on the network, these kind of things are important, whether that be a generator, whether that be a demand piece of equipment that's got significant implications. Any other things as well that we can we may foresee that if we know the point of connection is going to be a significant distance from site, anything that you may know locally and regarding land ownership or land rights that you may know, that you can give us help and advice to say, well, I know that if you're coming from there, going through those two fields, that won't work because we don't have good relationships with that person, or we have excellent relationships with that person, so please utilise a route through there. It'll be a shorter route or a more beneficial route from a timescale perspective. And we may also contact you if there's a couple of options, and there may be, if there's different options at different prices, or there may be one that's different prices and different timescales associated with it, and what's more important for your project, is it the timescale element or is it the cost element? So again, we would contact you to discuss that, just to make sure that you can see what's the best solution for you. If we can move on to the next slide, I think pass you over to Eugene.
Just before we get going, I've got a question here for you, and that is, in terms of a formal offer and the least cost offer. So the question here is, what is the process to be able to obtain an offer that may be more expensive, but in practice would be more suitable for a project?
So simply request that and speak to the designer that you're dealing with at the time. There's not an issue with that. We would call that an enhanced scheme. So, but it depends on the type of change that you're talking about, whether we would class that as an enhanced scheme. So if it's something significantly more than what you would normally expect for that type of connection, that would be an enhanced scheme. But if it's something that you maybe just looking at what is a slightly more viable route, or you think you would like to take that route underground rather than overhead, those things are less likely to be classed as enhanced schemes, but each one would be taken in its own merits.
So the main thing is just as much detail as possible to enable you to be able to quote properly.
Yes, that's it. We will find a lot of the time, if we're doing a long cable route, as a good example, a lot of the time we'll price that. We know that a potential overhead line route isn't going to be feasible. A lot of the time, an overhead route is theoretically the lowest cost option, but it's reality, it's not going to be the lowest cost option. By the time, the years it takes you to get it done, and the number of times you have to then divert it or change the route, it's quite often not the preferred version. So a lot of the time, we could what we can do is look at a route that maybe utilises adopted roads wherever as much as possible. So it's not always going to be the straightest line between A and B, but it's one where you can control timelines far better. You're not dealing with third parties and things like that. So it's different options that would be discussed, and we would take each job in its merits and whether that would class as enhanced scheme or not.
Okay, I think that answers Iona's question. I've got another question here, which I'm not quite sure fits in here, and that's about, could we use match funding instead of any finance? I think from your perspective, you would really just be looking at this is the cost and how it's paid is paid, rather than how it's actually funded. So I would think that the question there, Sandy, that you've asked is more around funding rather than specific to how spend can actually work here. So if you can clarify that question a little bit more, Sandy, that would be really useful. And thanks for your response. Okay. We'll go over to Eugene now. Thanks.
Okay, if we could move to the next slide, please. Okay, as previously mentioned by Derek, connection offer expenses may apply to a formal quotation inquiry that exceeds 250 kVA for demand or 50 kVA of generation. This upfront charge is for the assessment and design of the proposed connection that the designer completes to provide the formal offer. The designer will undertake many network assessments prior to issuing the offer, and the connection offer expenses are to cover the time taken to complete the assessment and the design. So following the application, the designer will contact you to discuss your requirements and notify you of what assessments fees may apply for your specific project. If you decide that you no longer wish to pursue the application, you must notify us in writing within 5 working days of receiving our notification. If you notify us after the cooling off period has expired, we may charge you for any reasonable costs incurred. So if the designer has actually started work on it and putting time into do it, we may seek a discounted fee. Of course, the charge is subject to the connection type and capacity, so it'll be dependent upon whether it is demand or generation, and at what voltage level we were looking at that as well. Could I have the next slide, please? So once the application has been progressed beyond the cooling off period, the designer will prepare your quotation offer. They will issue it along with an invoice for the design and assessment fees. You must pay the invoice within 14 days of issue, even if you do not proceed with through to construction. So what I've attached below are a link to the Energy Networks connection offer expense with F&Q, so that it should answer any queries that you have in relating to that. There's also a connection offers leaflet which gives a quick run through of which the flow chart and the process to the right hand side is included in that, and also is a link to the latest statement of charges, which provides the design and assessment fee for the capacity, voltage and application type within the charging methodology. I believe it's back to you, Derek, if there's no questions on that.
Yep, thanks, Eugene. Yep. So just to run through a couple of the tools that are available within SP Energy Networks and on our website. The first one to highlight here is the distributed generation heat maps, which we have that cover both the SP ManWeb and the SP distribution area. These are useful resources. You'll see once you click into them as an example, a screenshot below of how it looks, that you'll see what the network looks like in that area. There's color coding of the network, so you can see whether there's any restrictions, any capacity challenges. That we are going through quite a challenging time at the moment. We'll discuss that in a few slides time, but there is a lot of interesting activity on the network at the moment. So there is quite a lot of red shown on some of our drawings at the moment. So just to be aware of that and be mindful of that. But you can see in here that there's when you go into the maps, you can click on particular substations, whatever in the area that you're looking to work. It'll give you the name of the substation, the voltages it's operating at, what its capacity is, what the existing maximum loads and minimum loads are, what the contracted generation is, what the actual connected generation is, the category status, whether we have thermal issues and fault level issues, or just one or t'other, and then when, if there's any works planned for it, when potential release dates that the restrictions will be removed or lifted on that. So it gives you a step for a hint, and it's one of these things that if it's a useful tool to have a look at first, potentially prior to coming to us with either a formal application or even coming to us for a chat in advance. We're quite happy to do connection surgeries with potential customers to have a chat about what the options and opportunities are. We just need to be mindful of the time of that we can't provide like instant on-demand feasibility studies. We would need to go away and look at networks and things like that, but we can have a good idea and a chat and point potentially highlight some challenging areas if there's certain things that you're looking at, and give you some hints and tips for that. If you can move on to the next slide, please. The other tool that we also have is the Open Data Portal, which has been developed over the last couple of years to get more and more information put into it. This is now where our long-term development statement, or we're terrible for acronyms in the industry, you might hear it being referred to as the LTDS, but this is where it's now located. And within that, you can find lots of useful information about what our substation capacities are, what the existing maximum demands are, what our projected maximum demands are, what connection activity there is in the area, what generation activity there is, what's connected, contracted. So there's a lot of really useful information, particularly in the LTDS, but there's so much more than just the LTDS in that. It's a relatively easy tool to register for. If you go to the website, you'll see on the main Open Data Portal there is a quick YouTube video, 2-3 minutes long, that gives you some advice on how to sign up for it, and then the wealth of tools that will hopefully make it useful for you. So if you could go to the next slide, please. So within the Open Data Portal, the most kind of important and likely things that you'd be looking to look at, mentioned before, the long-term development statement. There's also the our network development plan, and there's information there on our distribution future energy scenarios, the generation connection heat maps, the embedded capacity register. There's various operational data on there. There's information about curtailment and previous curtailment, so that if you're thinking about a project that might be in a congested area and you're considering is curtailment going to be suitable for you, you can see what's been happening on other similar projects or similar areas. There's information on flexibility, and there's also, from the local authority perspective, there's the local authority network insight tool called LANET, and it's a useful tool that helps local authorities to plan their investment as well, so they can put in things like, I'm going to change in this street, I'm going to change to heat pumps. How's that going to affect the local network? Is that going to need reinforcement, or can the network deal with that? And there is plans over hopefully to be extending that beyond the local authorities in the future. But I say I don't have timelines for that at the moment. So that's the kind of the tools. Was there comments on that? I think there was a couple of questions popped up.
Yeah, just one question really, and that is for someone who obviously covers another network area as well. That is the LTDS Open Data Portal similar to the SSCN Lenser tool?
I couldn't comment on a SSEN's tool, but certainly I know there's the information's available in a variety of formats. Once you get into the Open Data Portal, and there is APIs available for you to try and integrate with your own systems as well, if that's of any use.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
That's all. Thanks.
Okay, I think we move on to the next slide, if that's okay. I think Eugene was covering.
Thanks, Derek. In terms of the capacity issues in SPM, it's probably worth starting to say that each application will have its own specific requirements and network capacity limitations. The existing electricity infrastructure may not be capable of providing the demand or generation you require for your installation. Your installation may also be subject to planning, network reinforcement, and land rights, which can take up to excess of 12 months to attain and construct prior to commencement of your project. Once the designer has assessed your requirements, they will provide you with an understanding of the complexity of the project and an anticipated lead time to connect. Currently in SPM, any generation connection greater than or equal to 1 megawatt will require additional national grid connection assessment fee, and will join the queue to be connected. This is anticipated to be at the earliest 2037, given the significant amount of reinforcement that National Grid is having to do to their distribution network. So in the SPM area, there are significant EV connection hotspots along most major A roads. And we are undertaking a significant reinforcement program to upgrade our low voltage, our 11 kV and 33 networks to enable further growth and transition to net zero. And if we look at the slide, the graphs and maps are an extract from our distribution future energy scenarios, the DFES on the open portal, which allows customers to view our current demand on the network and the projected future growths. This can be viewed by voltage technology within the specific area. So you can actually sort of like filter on what you actually want to see. It's very, as Derek said earlier, it's very, very user friendly in order to be able to see the area in which you wish to either put a connection on and see what is the state of the network in there. Once registered, you can do the data on the portal, and I've also put a couple of links in there for the page, and also then there's a SPM 2024 DFES document, which just gives a good insight into what we are trying to achieve as we move forward to net zero. And I think it's back to you, Derek.
Yep. Thanks, Eugene. Yep. So I just wanted to kind of highlight again, very, very similar picture to Eugene's patch within SPM with our DFES projections. We're doing similar work with regard to our investment programme. Mentioned earlier on with the structures when we talked about the development house, where we're looking at what the situation is with the current network. We're also looking to work with developers as much as possible to find what's the best kind of mutually beneficial solutions, both for the wider populace and the developer themselves. So if there is reinforcement opportunities that we can look at that would present themselves potentially as the actual lowest cost option, then we'll look into to do these as possible to bring it, maximise as many benefits as possible to both the developer and the wider community where we can do that. But kind of moving on to some capacity challenges that we do have. What I've mentioned here about thermal capacity and fault level, they're the biggest challenges that we have across the network. And this is just a kind of a wide view of the SPD area, and there is quite a lot of red you can see on that. Because we have been very successful in the past in securing lots of wind farms, battery storage sites, and such like at a distributed generation level. However, that success comes along with the fact that we need the transmission network is now getting towards the tipping points, and there's a lot of work now required on the transmission network to enable further growth. To give you some numbers, to give you an example of that, the current SP distribution winter maximum demand is in the region of about 3.25 gigawatts. Connected distributed generation within the SPD patch is actually 3.38 gigawatts. So that's just the distributed generation, not the transmission level. And contracted distributed generation, we've got 8.14 gigawatts. So way more. Say about a total contract. The total position is 11.5 gigawatts contracted across the patch, with a total overall network capacity of around about 11 gigawatts. So we're at the limits from a thermal capacity point of view, and because there's so much local generation as well, that presents some fault level challenges on the network. So we need to make sure that all our plant is within design ratings, so that we maintain the safety of our operators and obviously of the public as well. There is some challenges, obviously, when you see the colour of that map. There's potentially a fair few legacy projects from the past few years that are taking up some capacity that may not be progressing as quickly as we would like. So with the Clean Power 2030 and then connections reform, there's hope that over the next year or so things will move and change in this area. The fact that we'll then be able to look at some old legacy projects that aren't moving or and are never going to move, to allow other newer, more shovel ready and more beneficial to the wider network and the GB as a whole, that we'll be able to get them moved forward. So there is hope that there's been some rulings and changes over the last year or so that will help us to move forward with that, to improve that picture. But there is still has to be a wider acknowledgement that we are at the stage now where there's significant transmission works required for a lot of projects in areas where we've got some challenges from a timescale perspective then, where we're into the 2030s before we're able to achieve some major connections. So that was just a summary. Hopefully not too doom and gloom. There is light at the end of the tunnel with connections reform and Clean Power 2030, but it's just to make sure that people are aware of there is some significant timelines associated with some major works nowadays. And that's it from me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We've just got one question going back to the point of tools, and that was Iona's responded just to say, I think from what we said, the Lenser tool is similar to what you just said about the tool used by a local authority in the SPEN area. So that's the local authority network insight tool. When you say you have no timescale for when it might be open to others other than local authorities, is there anything further you could say about that from the SSEN Lenser tool? Apparently it can be accessed by others at the moment with using a letter of support from a local authority.
Mm-hmm. I would pass that forward to our stakeholder team. They would be they are the ones that have released the LANET tool, and the other ones are looking forward to doing that. So possibly Liam might be able to assist in providing some contacts for that within the wider stakeholder team.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we've rapidly gone through that agenda to date, so we are actually ahead of time, which is good. So what we will do is have a break now, and we'll reconvene at 1:30. So we've got a 10-minute break, and we'll reconvene at 1:30. So we shall see you then. Thank you very much. Okay, I would like to welcome Paul, who's going to talk about the delivery side. Thank you.
Thanks, Ross, for the introduction. Hi, my name's Paul Thomas. I'm head of delivery for Merseyside. My team covers connections from 240 volts up to 33,000 volts across the Merseyside district. Our patch covers north of the River Mersey, from Southport all the way down to Liverpool, over to Widnes and St Helens. If you need any contact details, you can find my contact details and then the head of delivery contact details on the SP Engineer website. Eugene and Derek have taught you through a broad range of projects, but today I'll be quite concentrated on the minor connections delivery process. However, if you have any other projects that you'd like to speak to a delivery head or get some delivery advice on it, feel free to reach out on the details from the website, and we'll be happy to discuss any projects, even if you haven't got a job in going through quotes or anything like that. We'll try to remove problems before they happen. So we're happy to help you and give you some advice regarding your design processes. So as I said, we're going to go through minor connections today. So as a regulated business, Ofgem sets quite stringent guidelines on how we operate, and this is especially prudent for minor connections. So we've got LVSSA projects, which are small low voltage demand projects to a single premises, involving a single phase connection and no significant other work. And then LVSSB, these are more or less 1 to 5 domestic premises, fewer than 5 single phase connections at the premises. So like you could have HMO or something like that. And also single premises regarding a 2-phase or 3-phase connection. So these can be commercial properties as well, and can also include some extension to the existing network. And pretty much our bread and butter projects, which we do the most of. Both these categories fall into our time to connect work stream. This is something that Ofgem brought in probably last March, where we meant to try and work with the other DNOs to get projects completed within a given timescale. For LVSSA, time to connect target is 17 days from acceptance, and for LVSSB, the time to connect target completion date is within 23 days. This isn't guaranteed timescales, but they're designed to try and give the customer more of an idea of how long the project will take, rather than just we'll connect it when we're ready, and it allows them to program their times more effectively. On that note, I would say if anyone's got any projects like this, please be aware that don't accept the projects until you're ready to deliver the projects. The idea you need a connection within 17 or 23 days, because if your quote's valid for 3 months, that price is fixed, as Eugene I think mentioned, or Derek mentioned before. We can also get an extension to that if you think you need a bit more time, but just be prudent. Once you accept, if you're not ready within those timescales, we may cancel the quotation, and then it'll have to go all the way back through the design process again, which we don't want you to do, and we don't want us to be doing and wasting time and stuff like that. So just be mindful that if in doubt, ring one of the delivery heads or the design heads, or even your coordinator or design engineer, and just discuss it through. It's probably worth mentioning, I think Eugene mentioned it before, industry is full of acronyms. So if there's something you don't understand, due to the nature of our industry, we pride ourselves on all our safety procedures, and one of our golden rules is if you're unsure of a process or activity, then you just stop what you're doing and ask. Feel free to do that with us. If you're getting bamboozled with some of the science or some of the acronyms, we'll say, well, can you just please explain that for us? And we'll do our best to explain it, because everybody who's authorised is and trained up within the company is aware of that within the company. So we're happy to explain it to other people as well. So now I'll just take you through the basic delivery process for the job. So day 1 to 2, the customer sends in a signed acceptance and payment. We check the details, make sure the payments lines up, and then one of our coordinators will ring you just to introduce themselves, say I book a pre-vet, and go through any details with you. I'll probably discuss some of the projects online on the phone with you, and then we'll book in a pre-vet. Pre-vet's normally within 2 to 3 days at a time required by yourselves, and then they'll come on site just to check that what you've said on your quotation actually aligns with what you actually need on site. There's no point us booking all the work in and turning up 2 or 3, 4 weeks later and it not being what you've paid for. So we'll look through it. If everything looks good, then we'll book it in and start looking at connection dates. It does not, there might be minor changes where things have changed in your program, or you might not have understood a question and picked the wrong option. We can discuss them. If it's minor changes, then we can do a variation to quote. If it's something major where you've said you wanted 1 plot, but you need 6 or 5 or whatever, then we might have to go back for a requote, which is a pain, but it just needs to make sure that we've got everything in the right work stream, and that we can meet your commitments, really. So once that's been agreed, pre-vet's been agreed, the pre-vet will also drop off some materials that you might need for your connection, so ducting, meter boxes and whatnot, that you'll need to get installed before we turn up to site to actually carry out the works. We're happy to give guidance on how to install those. We can't install them for you, and then like cable entry points and that you'd have to do yourselves as well, but I'll talk to that regarding customer requirements towards the end. Once the date's been agreed, the spend coordinator then apply for permits from the council, enact any way leaves, any works in adopted land or third party land that may need a way leave, and then instruct our service partners to programme the works. We'll then confirm the works, that we've confirmed the dates, if we could do that, but then if we might also have to suggest alternatives if there's blockers such as opening notices in the area, which mean that we can't get in to work on the public realm because other might be gas or water or one of the other stats is working on it. We will try and work collaboratively with them to try and minimise that disruption too, but that's always something worth to mention. If you can give us a bit of notice before you even accept and say, look, I'm kind of looking at accepting around this time, feel free to do that, and then we'll have a look, say actually we could probably put a notice on, you should accept now, and we'll try and work through that going forward. We'll also, once we've agreed a date, we'll call you 5 days before we're due on site to make sure everything's okay and make sure you're still ready to proceed, or if we need to reschedule. It's worth noting, if any cancellations are after 5 working days, then aborted charges might be billed to the customer. So please keep that in mind when you're booking in work. On site for this type of project should take 3 to 5 days, comprising excavation, then jointing and installation of cutouts and some cabling, followed by backfill and reinstatement. We'll carry out all the off-site works, but then anything on site we'd expect you guys to do, unless there's been a special dispensation on that. But you can talk about that to your design team or the delivery team at the time. And then once works are fully complete, we'll ring you to make sure you're happy that the works have been complete to your satisfaction and there's nothing outstanding. Then from that, we'll close down the project. If we manage to do the project cheaper than we thought it was going to be, then you'll get a refund. If not, then we'll just close the project down. I think it's worth mentioning now just regarding the customer requirements and responsibilities. So customer needs to be ready to be installed, so we don't need any scaffolding up. The building's watertight. You believe enough amount of projects that we turn up and there's not even a slab in the ground, but they're saying they need a connection, and we need it to be watertight and secure, because at the end of the day we are putting an electricity supply in it, so we can't have any vandalism or anything going on. We also need the meter position being placed and the ducting's installed, so that's ducting from the meter position out through either a hockey stick or some ducting if it's a larger supply out to the boundary, and then we can dig in the public realm, do the jointing and run the service cable and everything through. And it'll be also the customer's responsibility to ensure that the MPAN that we supply on when we on acceptance is registered with the supplier, and they book in their own meter installation. That sometimes becomes a bit of a confusion because they see SP Engine Networks and Scottish Power think, well, I'm going to fit the meter, but we've not been able to fit meters for a good number of years now. I wish it was the other way, but this is the way the industry works. So your supplier will get their meter operator, or MOP, another acronym, to make sure they store the meter. So normally it happens within a day or two of doing our connection if it's programmed properly. So regarding time to connect, so the two LBSSA is 17 days, LBSB is 23 days, but there can be complications to that. As I said before, this isn't a guaranteed standard. It's what we aspire to do and what Ofgem wants us to do. There are possible complications, and as the way leave section of the discussion in a minute, if there's any third party way leaves, they can add 6 months, 12 months to the project. But there's something we could probably discuss with your design team and possibly us before you accept, and we could see what we can do, whether you get your own way leave to try and speed up the process, or I'll speak to our way leaves legal team, that they're very experienced in this area. Also, if it's any busy roads, routes that may need road closures, because we'll be going to be taking out the footpath or possibly digging in the road, it might need specialised traffic management. And also, it needs to be worth taking into thinking about. There may be embargoes in certain areas. So at Christmas in Liverpool Centre, there's pretty much a no-go on excavation on the major A roads. Similarly in Wales in the summer, during the holiday season, there are embargoes there as well. So it's probably always worth considering that and discussing with your design team, saying, I'm thinking about installing it on such a date. Do you think there'll be any embargoes? Because our guys are very experienced in this. We're doing it with all the time. We'll have a look through, speak to the council and go, actually, no, you're probably all right in that couple of weeks, or no, there's no go, or it may be even you have to do it in a half term because there's a school nearby. So just all things that you need to consider, really. And then there could be unlooping of existing supplies where you might be looped off next door. So we'll have to disconnect that to reconnect. And anything where you involve in a third party can lead to delays. So it's always worth knowing that up front, rather than you've got a bathroom turning up, you need it done tomorrow, or you've got a kitchen turning up and we've got to wait 2 to 3 months to get the connection. So we want to try and minimise the stress to you during this connection period. So we need as much information off from you up front. So like I say, I'll finish off now. So there's guiding documents available on our Getting Connected website. Mine and the other delivery details are all on that website as well. So I'm happy to field any questions if you've got any.
Hi everybody, I'm Laura Dempster. I'm the Distribution Land Manager covering SPD and SPM. My team are responsible for securing all the land rights for SPEN. So as you can see there from the organisational structure, we all report into Ross Baxter. Underneath me we have 3 team leaders. We've got Scott Morris in Distribution, Adam Bradley in ManWeb, and Jessica Gilmore, who is the team leader for the Land Assistance. Collectively, we've got 57 land assistants and land officers who are actively securing land rights across the network. Next slide, please. So the purpose of land rights, I'm aware I've only got 15 minutes, so I could talk for a while on land rights, but the appropriate land rights are basically required to install and keep installed the distribution network, which is the foundation for the delivery of ED2 programme and ED3. In order to fulfil statutory licence obligations and to fulfil our obligation to connect new customers to the existing network, we are required to secure the appropriate land right with relevant landowners or occupiers and any associated third parties. And this includes all apparatus from cables, overhead lines and substations. If the business failed to secure a land right, it basically places a lot of risk on the business in terms of the ongoing operation and the maintenance of the network. As a consequence, SPEN mustn't negotiate suitable terms for the land right prior to the installation of the apparatus. It's not really an option for the business to install without the land right, except in certain circumstances which will be previously agreed with the business. If we do connect without a land right, it's in breach of SPEN's Land Code of Conduct, which is basically SPEN's promise to our landowners and how we'll conduct ourselves on the land, and failure to secure a land right also places the licence business at risk of prosecution for trespass and considerable risk of inflated landowner payments to resolve the land right once the apparatus is installed and energised. Next slide, please. So in terms of land rights, there's broadly 2 main types. So there's a secure land right and a non-secure land right. Secure being ownership or purchase for substations or a lease for a substation. And for overhead lines and for cables, it's a servitude or an easement for England and Wales. That's applicable to overhead line and cables. The non-secure land right is a non-permanent right. So basically, we can secure that with the landowner or the occupier, but as soon as the land is then sold or transferred, the land right would fall away. So we only really use it in specific circumstances. It's not applicable for a substation. It's only applicable for overhead lines and underground cables. In terms of so for the purpose of this presentation, I've mainly focused on POC projects in the CIC world. However, generally, the connections workstream is broken up into 2 categories in terms of you've got your connections customers for full works, and then you've got your POC. Full works would benefit from way leases and the servitudes or the easement. For POC, it's likely only going to be close coupled lease, so the most secure right, and a servitude or an easement, just due to the risk that's potentially involved, and because of the type of apparatus that we do generally install through POC. Like I said, I focused on POC for the purpose of this presentation. However, the connections, so for full works and for POC, in terms of land and planning, the process of that land right is generally the same. The only difference is how I suppose land rights are instructed. So either it goes through the radar for POC, or it goes down the route of getting connected for full works. So for the POC, so the ICP would apply through radar. It's the design approved, and at that point the land rights instruction is raised through our internal program called SCOMS. It's then quality assured by the land assistant in land north or land south, depending on your area. It is then assigned to a land officer for a further quality assurance check before it's made live. The land officer reviews the project and carries out their due diligence. So they'll confirm the point of connection with the designer. If it is a full works, they'll discuss it with the project engineer to discuss the full requirements of the project. The likelihood is at that point there's going to be a site visit to meet with the customer to fully run through the project and its requirements, and also to update on land and planning's lead times, because that will have an impact to your program if the land right needs to be secured before the delivery, or so before it's delivered. As part of that due diligence, the land officer will check land ownership, if there's any third parties involved, if it needs to go to our legal team. So if it's a servitude, an easement, or a lease, the legal team will need to get involved. And at that point, we'll confirm solicitors' details, make sure that the plan is legally compliant with Register of Scotland if you're in Scotland, or in England it's the Land Registry. Once we're satisfied that all those checks have been carried out, we will then, so if applicable, we'll then contact third parties and landowners to agree heads of terms. Payment is then raised internally for spent legal fees or the third party legal fees, and a work instruction is then sent off to our internal legal team. They review it. From that point, it is then appointed to an external solicitor. In the north, that is usually Shepherd and Wedderburn. In the south, that is CMS at present. And from there, the legal process is kicked off. So now, in terms of that legal process and what that looks like, there's a title review at the outset. So the customer is required to send everything to their solicitor in terms of their land ownership. The solicitor will then carry out a title review and go through everything with a fine-tooth comb, looking for other easements or servitudes which may affect our apparatus. They'll look for potential reservations on the title that may impact us as a result as a business. They also issue the draft documentation, so we do have standard form documentation in form of a way leave, an easement, servitude, lease, close coupled lease. Generally, these are reviewed every few years with the intention that we review them in line with industry standards, but also to keeping our customers in mind. So checking what the most common amendments are and what the business accepts, just making sure that the documents are as up to date as possible to ensure that the documents are agreed in a swift and timely manner to minimise the delay to the customer journey. Once the documents are agreed, it then is handed back to the land officer. They do the internal check in terms, or the internal approval in terms of SAP-RE. It then is brought to a conclusion. The land officer updates the project delivery team, and at that point they then engage in terms of dates. For POC and for the full works, the process is generally the same. The land rights that are involved are generally the same. The lead times are pretty much the same as well. The only difference is how land and planning get instructed, and then obviously the end process. So POC would go back through radar. If it's full works, it would just go through to your delivery engineer. Next slide. And times for the project. So if it's POC, close coupled lease is approximately 34 weeks. So from the point land and planning get instructed to the point it's released to your delivery team or to Spen's delivery team is approximately 34 weeks to negotiate the terms of the lease. Servitude and easements is approximately 30 weeks, and overhead lines is approximately 64. The reason for the 64-week lead time is generally because overhead line, regardless whether it's England or Wales or Scotland, it needs to go through full planning. So in terms of the process, you would need, or the land officer would need to engage with the local authority to obtain simplified notification, which is basically the consent of the local authority. They also need to engage with all the landowners along the route to gain the consent via way leave or servitude or an easement. And then the last stage in the process is getting Section 37, which is basically the government consent to go ahead and install the apparatus. Because it's an overhead line, the likelihood is there's going to be a lot of assessments carried out and surveys. So an overhead line survey, environmental surveys, if there's any designations such as SSSIs, SPAs, conservation sites, these are all the types of engagement that Spen as a business need to consider. And that's applicable whether it's POC or full works. If Spen are adopting the apparatus, we still need to carry out those due diligence checks and obtain relevant planning permission where required. The only thing I don't have on that list that I realise now is a lease. A lease is approximately 54 weeks. I know that these lead times that I'm given are worst case, and a lot of that is derived from complications that we may get. So if we go on to the next slide, please. So a lot of our challenges and what affects those lead times, a lot of it can be down to the information that we receive from the customer at the outset, which ultimately feeds into the design. So I know that Derek touched on it and Neil also touched on it, but the more engagement that you as a customer can do with landowners, so i.e. third parties, to almost preempt them that Spen will be in touch, the better, I suppose, because you're preempting the conversation that we're going to have and you're almost priming them for and making them aware of what's to come or what Spen will require to allow your connection to be fulfilled. So the more information we can get from the outset, the better. And the other thing that kind of delays us is almost the plans. So if the legal team are required to be involved, the standard of plans that we receive to ensure it's legally compliant. So over the last couple of months, myself and Robert Fusco within the customer relationship team and design and development, we've been engaging to better understand our requirements as a business, and then we've collated a checklist to basically inform customers what we require as a minimum to ensure that the customer journey is improved and also going to minimise delays to the project. We are in the process of creating the document. It's almost ready to be issued. It can be issued to customers and it will also be issued to the design team and the land and planning team to ensure it is getting that quality assurance. I think it's a 4-stage process for the checklist and making sure that we are ticking every box. It mainly does focus on Spen's legal drawing standards, but right now that's where our biggest challenge lies, and that's where the customer journey is mostly impacted. It's estimated that it's around 12-week impact. So right now 54 weeks, that's worst case. Like if it's a substation, likelihood is if we get all the required information from the outset, about 8 or 9 months is probably more realistic. But yeah, those are our main challenges at present. Is there any questions anyone has?
I can't see any questions that have come up at the moment. So what we will do is just use some time right at the end if any questions come up in the meantime. So thank you very much.
Thank you. What I'll just add quickly, I understand that was a whistle-stop tour of land and planning. But if anybody does have any questions after the session or in the coming weeks or months, feel free to drop me a phone call or an email, and I'll be happy to answer any queries. Thank you.
For your time. Okay, I'm now going to hand over to. We're going to go through 2 case studies. The first is from Neil, and he's going to talk about the project they've been involved in and their experience in terms of going through that connection process. Neil, thank you.
Aye, thank you very much, Ross, and thanks to Liam and Ross for the invitation. I hope you don't live to regret it. But here we go anyway. This is just a little microcosm into the world of small community energy systems. So currently I work for the West Lothian Climate Action Network Hub. There are now 24 of those around the country. And prior to that, I worked for Warmworks as a communities manager, but in my free time, I was involved in helping to set up Linlithgow Solar, which is part of Linlithgow Community Development Trust, and some of those learnings are now moving forward into the energy ambitions of the hub networks throughout Scotland, particularly in the southeast of Scotland, which covers the City of Edinburgh region deal. So I just wanted to say a few words about what I think is quite a positive journey in terms of the connections and the support that we had from Scottish Power Energy Networks. And it is really great to see the incredible progress over the last 4 or 5 years since we installed our system. So congratulations to the team. Could I go on to the next slide, please? So we have 5 community-owned solar systems on 5 clubs up to about 70 kilowatt peak capacity, which is about the same as 20 homes worth. And these were installed over 2 years, 2019 and 20, just before COVID, which proved quite challenging. It was all funded by bonds, and in the second phase, we very graciously got a grant from the Green Economy Fund, which was managed by EST, Local Energy Scotland, and provided through Spen's Green Economy Fund. There are 25-year power purchase agreements and roof leases in place, and it was really interesting to hear from Laura all about the various legal issues, which we had quite a few of, and that was a huge task, albeit very small systems. The way the systems and the project works is that we own, or I say the trust here locally owns the systems and sell the electricity back at a cheaper rate than the grid. We put money aside to pay back the bonds with interest and any maintenance that's required, and then the surplus goes back into the trust to spend on good stuff like, education and green spaces activities and all sorts of things. So that's just a wee bit about the project and the background. Could you move on, please? Thanks, Ross. In terms of the connection journey, well, as I said to you before, it was a pretty positive journey. It was under the old G59 application process, which now falls under a larger regime. And I think, things have obviously moved on, as I can sense from our colleagues today from Spen. We did get, some support in the second phase through the consultants Locogen, which was very, very handy. Each application took around 6 to 8 weeks, and bearing in mind again that these are just sub 30 kilowatt systems. Throughout the journey, the Spen officials were really helpful and accessible, including the grid engineers, who you could often phone up and ask them about any issues and faults. And we were aware at the time that there was a fault on the Linlithgow Grangemouth grid, which I think has now been rectified. Some systems in this region had to have inhibitors, but fortunately we didn't have any of those issues. What I will say, though, is that the costs were quite expensive for our small trust. Most community development trusts struggle for cash, and it's often hard to find extra cash, albeit we had support from CARES and Local Energy Scotland. So I see now that the system may have changed. So sorry that I'm not completely up to date with things, but I saw from Derek's wonderful presentation that the budget cost quotation is free, which is great, but I'm assuming there'll still be a cost to process to the formal system. So a wee bit behind with that. The other issue is that we were charged 20% VAT, and I know that if you're registered for VAT, you can reclaim that, but a lot of trusts are not. Sometimes we found the language a bit hard to decipher on the forms, and so I think maybe perhaps a wee bit of dumbing down for the layperson might be quite helpful. If you've not get a consultant, it can be very hard and time consuming for ordinary volunteers to get their heads around these things. But overall, the Green Economy Fund and the support we got from Local Energy Scotland was a huge boost to the phase 2, because it helped us as local people to overcome some of the bureaucratic red tape barriers, and there's a lot of it, not just the grid connection, but lots of other things. So that's a kind of very short tail whistle-stop tour of our connection journey. If you could move on, Ross, please. Lessons learned. Well, I think as the Spen officials have alluded to today, begin discussions early if you can. Connect with the customer team and the grid engineers, if you can get a hold of those as well. And I appreciate, there are other professionals here that can support, including Liam himself, who is, I believe, relatively new to the position, and wonderful to see that, Spen are, putting in so much effort into community energy. I think it's fantastic. But, for community organisations themselves, get in touch with the right people as early as you possibly can, develop that relationship, get the best advice. Obviously, as I say, the process has changed through the EU regulations, and it is a complex business, so you need someone to kind of steer you through that if you're not up to speed with everything, because it's a complex process, even for sub 50, sub 40, sub 30 kilowatt systems. In this case, we're talking about solar panels here on roofs. You still need a project plan. You need to think about each stage, and often they overlap. And whilst you're waiting for your building warrant to come through, you're having to think about your grid application and the timing of those, and when the funds come in and are available. And most of these phases kind of overlap, but obviously there are some critical milestones there in terms of getting your building warrant, getting your grid application processed and approved, and it should be relatively speedy in most instances, unless there's something untoward, and you'll still have to deal with things like title deeds and whaleys and some of the things that the Spen officials have just mentioned today. And of course, bigger projects, as we can see, may require a lot more time, a lot more input, and other factors like road closures, inhibitors, as we mentioned, and often the grid connection can be cost prohibitive, which basically renders a lot of these projects non-viable. So really important that you have a team or a person to stick with this from the beginning to the end. We had a project management team in place. We had an engineer, we had a legal representative, we had myself in terms of renewables and community engagement, and we had a few other people that could advise us from the local community, all volunteers for the trust, and that was absolutely indispensable, as well as having the support agencies that are available to us. And of course, perseverance is key. You really have to have quite a level of stamina and tolerance to put up with everything that is required. And ironically, the installations take less than a week, and the development planning phase can take more than a year, even for tiny systems. So be prepared. Just a little plug to end my little slideshow here. The West Lothian Climate Action Network and friends, in partnership with Local Energy Scotland and others, are holding a webinar on the 7th of May for local community organisations and businesses who are interested in developing their own community energy systems, particularly around solar, rooftop and ground mounted. And so if you're interested in that, please do get in touch. We're going to have some great guest speakers there as well, and an interactive workshop, and other regions are also invited. We have other hubs from the southeast of Scotland that are interested in this, so please do get in touch, and thank you very much again for the invitation. It's been a real honour to speak to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Neil. We don't have any questions for you at the moment, and so we will move on to Richard, who's going to talk through his experience further south. Thanks.
Hi, good afternoon. I hope you can hear me okay.
All good.
Many thanks for letting me present something about our community energy work at Ashton Hayes. If you can go on to the next slide. So Ashton Hayes is a small village in Cheshire, which lies in the Merseyside, Cheshire and North Wales region, operated by SP Energy Networks, often termed the SP ManWeb region. A rather different point, since a recent boundary change, we now fall in the constituency that's having a by-election tomorrow. If you know anything about that, it's a very different story. But to move on, we started our community energy journey in 2005 when a small group of enterprising individuals proposed the Going Carbon Neutral initiative for the village. The milestones over the last 20 years can be found at our website. I have to admit that I was not involved in this project until 2017, so I'm presenting this information on behalf of those dedicated individuals. Unfortunately, several of them have moved to live elsewhere now, and relative to Neil, who just spoke, I feel very amateur in all of this. And the timeline shown on this slide and the one after can be found on our website. A lot has gone on in addition to the hardware that I'm going to talk about today. So in 2010, SP Energy Networks effectively adopted the village with a project called Ashton Hayes Smart Village. They fitted monitoring equipment to the supply transformers and various community buildings so that we could properly measure any reductions in the energy consumption that we were achieving on a quarterly basis from this Going Carbon Neutral initiative. And this was part of an enduring collaboration between the village and SP Energy Networks. In April 2010, we were awarded a Low Carbon Challenge Fund grant for solar panels at the primary school, where a replacement classroom was being proposed. But a delay due to the general election that year severely reduced the time available to complete the project, and it became evident that the school classroom design and construction would not happen in time. We were then allowed to change direction and managed to build and fit out a new sports pavilion on some recently acquired land just before the deadline in April 2011. Although, as I understand it, the roof was actually on the building on the day that planning permission was granted to build it. So this consisted of 10 kilowatts of solar panels, a heat pump, and an electric vehicle charger. Meanwhile, at the primary school, we were able to purchase and store 15 kilowatts of panels and inverter while waiting for a new classroom to be constructed with the appropriately designed roof. And this was completed in December 2011, which would have fallen outside of the grant timing. So also that year, we established Ashton Hayes Community Energy Company to manage the income from the panels and the future expenditure. For those involved, there was a lot of bold decision making, and we were ably supported by Dr. Mary Gilly as a consultant who helped navigate the way through the DNO pathways and processes. As regard the electrical connections at the pavilion, which was a new build, the main obstacle was a road crossing. This was usually underground, but permission was given for an overhead line and then a relatively simple trench at low cost within the budget available. Meanwhile, at the school, I think the initial quote was about 14,000 for the connection. But with some negotiation, we were allowed to put a trench along the verge and through the school grounds rather than under tarmac, and the cost was significantly reduced. Next slide, please. So by 2016, the Community Energy Company had accumulated sufficient funds to add another 15 kilowatts of panels at the primary school. SP Energy Networks had decided that the supply transformer for that section of the village needed uprating, and this was done by them without any further cost to the community. And next slide, please. So last year, in 2024, we received a grant from Cheshire Council to install a battery and backup gateway at the sports pavilion. Approval for that was straightforward, with the capacity available on the existing three-phase supply. More interestingly, after more than 10 years without a pub in the village, the community has been able to buy the premises from a very unsupportive owner. Now, with the refurbishment almost complete, we're in the process of installing 26 kilowatts of solar panels on the ground at the back of the original car park. One learning from me has been how relatively space inefficient ground-mounted panels are compared to having a nicely sloping roof. Unfortunately, the roof of the pub shown here, which does face pretty much due south, is in a conservation area and fitting panels would not be possible. So the points I want to make are primarily, quite often nothing is easy. And I say that from the outside and not as someone who experienced a lot of the pain. Probably obtaining planning permission being one of the toughest items to coordinate. Particularly at the school, the timing of the whole classroom development was outside our control, while we still needed to negotiate the optimization of and the structure of the roof. We found engagement of the local community was imperative. The primary school was central to this, through the pupils, the parents, and the use of their facilities. Now, maybe as some form of payback, they're a big beneficiary of some free electricity. Perhaps we were fortunate as an early starter to establish a very supportive relationship with SP Energy Networks, and that continues today. We were able to employ a consultant to support us through the process and jargon of working with the DNO, which was invaluable. I think if you know you're going in the right direction, some of the pressure is at least removed. The last few points are pretty much a personal view and just intended to be helpful. I'll finish by saying that if you know you're trying to do something good for the community, I think you can generally make things work. Thanks very much for the opportunity, and yeah, if anyone has any questions.
Thank you very much, Richard. Only just a comment that came through from Neil earlier, which was that there are solar PVs on grade listed A buildings and churches in the UK. So it's obviously it's a nonsense that there are from your planners. That's Neil's personal view. So obviously it is a challenge in terms of different situations on many occasions, but yes, it is a challenge there.
Thank you.
Okay, if there are any other questions, there's a chance to put them in the chat now. I'm now going to hand over to Liam to add some closing remarks. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Ross. It was just to actually circle back to one of the comments that was in the chat earlier from Iona with regards to the LANET tool in comparison to the Lensa tool that's offered by SSEN. The access to the tool that we have on the open data platform is controlled and does have some level of regulation with it. But if I'm being honest, I think the comparison that you gave from a letter of support from the local authority would be something that we can discuss with the team that deals with that. The team that does deal with that are known as the Strategic Optimization Team. And again, if you follow up with the Community Energy email address, I'd be more than happy to talk that through with the wider team and put that response forward. But my thinking would be that if the access is relevant and is supported by the local authority, then there would be an opportunity for that. If I could get the next slide, please, Ross. So just to summarise on today's overall connections workshop that we've had, as you can see from the graphic on the left, it gives an overview of the community energy sector that exists across the two licence areas that we operate within, SPD and SPM. Within that area, there are 70 active groups with over 10,000 members within each group. However, within that section, there is also only 114 people within these groups that are full-time employed, with 700 active volunteers. So there is a high interest in this sector. But again, probably from a support method, there are a lot of people putting in a lot of time to make sure that these projects are viable. So my hope would be that this learning output from today has been helpful and has supported some of those individuals. As far as going forward from engaging with us and making sure that these conversations are continuing to go on and that the support that we offer is relevant, and reaching out to us, you can help give insight into our community energy strategy, parts that you think have been relevant and parts that you think perhaps need to be developed. Looking at different partnerships. So again, as Neil and Richard had spoken about, if you are an active community energy group and would like to take forward an existing project, one that you have prospectively, we would really like to hear from you and see what support we can give, especially from a connections point of view, as you've heard throughout today, and also from a flexibility point of view. If there's commercial potential with projects, we can look at different ways that actually projects can help to benefit the grid itself. And as mentioned on a couple of occasions, specifically with the LANET tool and working with local authorities and looking at different local heat and energy efficiency strategies and seeing how community energy can play a role in that as well. To circle back to the flexibility and balancing of the grid, we also have an upcoming summit in Liverpool on the 17th of September. If you would like to register your interest for that event, you can see the QR code that is in orange at the bottom, and that will take you straight to the link for that. As far as our engagement and reaching out to you, it will be centred around, as I mentioned before, the community energy strategy development, looking at our online resources, which ones need to be upgraded and which ones need to be further included, and looking at wider sector support. So again, if there are groups or affiliated groups within the community energy sector, we would like to get in contact with you, and we'll proactively be doing that over the coming months and year. Sharing success, looking at different case studies. So again, with the examples that were highlighted from Neil and Richard today, and making sure that we're promoting the benefits of community energy successful stories. And moving on from today's workshop, looking at different topics that we can cover to help support and build capacity within this sector. So from me, just to finish off, I'd like to say a special thank you to Ross for facilitating today's workshop, to Nicola, Derek and Eugene, Paul and Laura, and Neil and Richard have found your insights very helpful, and I hope everyone else has too. And once again, just to say that if you are in need of reaching out to the community energy team or the connections team, the best port of call would be through the email address that you can see at the bottom. So thanks again.
And thank you. We have no more questions at all. So thank you very much for everyone attending. And I think we'll close the event now. Thank you then. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. All the best. Cheers. Bye.
Thank you.